But the sound that you might hear emanating from the Royal Albert Hall this weekend is the massive peroration at the final of the National Brass Band Championships. And you can probably hear an echo of these musical powerhouses, 20 bands in total, from Corey to Flowers to the Brighouse and Rastrick, at every corner of the land. And all 20 of them are playing music by Edward Gregson, a piece called Of Men and Mountains that's taken more than 30 years to get to its rightful place on the music stands of the finalists. We'll hear from Edward Gregson soon, but another of the bands are the current champions of the last 2 years, Foden's, who are going for a historic hat-trick. So how to prepare for the trials and tribulations of the biggest competition of the brass banding year? We found out at Foden's rehearsals at Sandbach near Crewe in the company of Mark Wilkinson, principal cornet and Foden's manager.
I think people stereotype bands as playing marches all the time. It's nothing like that. We play different genres of music. We have good working relationships with Mike Lovett from BBC Big Band. The band's prior musical director was Bamwell Tovey. One of our vice presidents is John Wallace, and the band's new president is Paul Melia, the highly acclaimed composer. So even though we're sort of seen as a brass band, we have a huge outreach working with all these different ensembles and highly regarded musicians outside of the brass band scene.
And can we start with the new tune number 54?
I'm Russell Gray and I'm the conductor of the Foden's band. I've had a great admiration for the band for decades actually. I used to play with the band many years ago, and then the band invited me back in 2018 to take the band to the contest. I come in just under 2 weeks before an event and I rehearse the band almost every evening in the run-up to the event, and then we go on and do the best we can.
Can we do it from 2 before 2?
One of the reasons the band's perhaps so successful is the consistency, and that we don't have a high turnover of players. So the person who I sit next to, we've sat next together for about 12 years. That sort of working relationship where you know someone's going to do something, even though you don't actually have to talk about it, just happens.
And I remember watching Steve Davis, you know, the snooker player. He got interviewed about the difference between being great or being a winner. Because there's a lot of great players around, there's a lot of great bands around. And his answer was to be able to play like it doesn't matter when it really does. That's the difference. And I think we don't ever really try to win a contest, because as soon as we start doing that, I think the actual achievement of a win becomes that more elusive.
My name's Mel and I play the flugelhorn. I'm really excited about playing at the Royal Albert Hall, especially with our band, because the band are doing so well at the moment.
My name's John Barber. I'm principal trombone. I've been with the band 28 years. I think the magic of brass bands is, for me, the challenge, the technical requirements, the musicality, the sheer volume.
My instrument's quite an interesting one because there's only one flugel in the band, and there's 10 cornets, and then there's the horns, and then it goes down from there. So my instrument kind of blends between the upper band and the lower band, so it's quite nice being sitting in the middle of the band, so I can hear all the parts and fit my part in alongside them.
Once you've experienced 28 very sort of experienced players playing at the same time, playing in tune and playing as loud as they do, there's something physically moving about it that is unreplicated in any other ensemble.
Because the band does 30 to 35 concerts a year, recordings, tours, those other events in the band's calendars really benefit from the band going to competition, because we know where the standard needs to be, and then it's about maintaining that standard every time they go on stage, so it becomes a habit.
The sounds and voices of Foden's band in Sandbach. Well, Edward Gregson composed the test piece that Foden's and the 19 other bands in the finals will play, Of Men and Mountains. It was intended but not used for the 1991 National Championships, and it's taken until now for this 70-minute-long tone poem to assume its rightful place in the Royal Albert Hall. He'll tell us that story very soon. But Edward Gregson took us back to the early years of brass band commissioning.
The first original work for brass band that was set as a test piece was 1913. And interestingly enough, because of the kind of, I suppose, social situation then, it was called Of Labour and Love. It was kind of all about the working man and his commitment to work and his emotional life. And that was by a composer called Percy Fletcher. But I think test pieces themselves took off when some of the great English composers started writing for the medium. Holst, Elgar, Howells, John Ireland, later Vaughan Williams, all wrote original works for this very competition. And it's gone from there, really.
Your piece of Men and Mountains, that this is a work that's vast in scope, in personal meaning for you, Edward, and in terms of what it marks in your compositional ambition. Nonetheless, it has a bit of a checkered history when it comes to the specifics of the relationship with the championships.
Yeah, I'm afraid it does. This piece dates back to 1990. It was a commission from the Netherlands. And the agreement was that the following year, 1991, it was going to be used for the national championships in the UK at the Albert Hall. And a brass band in the Albert Hall, obviously, you can really write big music, big sounding music, a bit Strauss and Mahler kind of music, if you like. And I suppose my ideas took off from the fact it was going to be done at the Albert Hall. But in those days, I gather that Radio 2 used to cover the event live, and on the 6 o'clock bulletin would kind of announce the winner on the news on Radio 2. And my piece was about 4 minutes too long. So the organisers said, can you cut 5 minutes from the piece? Well, I wonder what Beethoven would have thought about cutting 5 minutes from his Fifth Symphony or whatever. And then it kind of went into hibernation, if you like.
Tell us about its specific inspirations, landscape, Canada, and personal too.
Yes, I mean, the title itself comes from William Blake, about great things occur when men and mountains meet. And really, it came about because of a train journey my wife and I took in 1989, right across Canada. We travelled across to Vancouver.
From Toronto. I mean, really, that's...
It's fantastic.
And a journey that takes you through that. I haven't done it myself. I'm just jealous of anyone who has. I mean, you are as close to being in those mountains without actually having to walk the thousands of miles.
Yes, you absolutely are. And if you get off, I think it's at Banff, you take what's called the Rocky Mountaineer, which is a single gauge railway. It goes literally through canyons and under mountains and everything that absolutely are inaccessible to anything, no cars or anything. So it is a fantastic experience, and it made me realise something about the kind of grandeur and, in a way, the ferocity of nature. And, we live now in an era where climate change is a big issue. But, I mean, there's also a kind of splendour, isn't there, about nature. When you go through mountains and canyons and rapids, it kind of makes you, I think, as a human being, very humble. So the piece takes on the idea of a spiritual journey. I suppose the idea of this eternal struggle with and against nature for mankind, and I suppose a spiritual journey for us all that we all try to undertake in a way from darkness to light, and that's what the piece is about. But the other idea, which is quite important, is the contrast between chromaticism and diatonicism. So the kind of tension of nature is represented by a 12-note theme as well, and the diatonicism of human attainment, spiritual attainment, which comes in release at the end with the tune that the whole piece has been searching for.
But I wonder how you feel. Look, obviously, for this piece, for you, this is where it belongs. How confident a scene is banding at the moment?
It's pretty confident, actually. And, we were talking about the early era of the 30s and 40s and 50s, before the Second World War, when bands were kind of being established in a kind of very organised way. And there's two things that have changed dramatically since those days. Most of those early bands playing in the 20s, 30s, 40s would have been either associated with factories, collieries, etc. Now it's changed dramatically. Thank goodness, there are lots of women playing in brass bands, and all the top bands, actually, interestingly enough, have a very wide spread all the way from sort of radiologists down to truck drivers, you know what I mean? The other thing that's interesting is that you find in the top bands in the country, there's quite a few of them now that have been trained in colleges of music or universities. And that's interesting because not all of them can go on to have a professional career in music, so they don't want to lose that kind of love of playing. And so obviously they keep that idea going through playing in a brass band. And brass bands have been very important, not least to actually providing most of the brass players in British orchestras.
Edward Gregson and Of Men and Mountains. Who's won the championship with their performance? Have Foden's done it again? We'll know by the end of the weekend.